The State Department for Parliamentary Affairs is under the office of a Prime Cabinet Secretary, and the Principal Secretary is Aurelia Rono, who joins us in studio to speak about building synergy between the Executive and the Legislature. Thank you very much, PS, for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's begin with the mandate of your State Department. I remember it was formed the executive order issued by President William Ruto, but really what is the mandate of your State Department?
Okay, thank you very much, John, for having me today here. What is the mandate of the State Department for Parliamentary Affairs? I'll start by saying there was this very bold move by the government, by His Excellency the President, in the year 2023 via that executive order, number 1 of 2023, to establish a State Department for Parliamentary Affairs within the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary to assist or to ensure that the policies and legislative initiatives are streamlined in the executive, so that we are able to achieve the National Development Agenda on time. State Department for Parliamentary Affairs vision is to ensure or to work towards ensuring that we are a premier agent in transformative government legislative agenda. That is to say, we want to take a lead in shaping the coordination and implementation of government legislative agenda. Remember, John, executive is there to implement government programs. These programs cannot be implemented or cannot be allocated resources if there is no legislative framework or policy framework behind it. So the State Department for Parliamentary Affairs ensures that it's an enabling environment. It's an enabling State Department that ensures that all the programs that are being allocated resources by government to assist the common mwananchi have legislative framework, policy framework, and regulatory framework. Yes. So you asked what are the functions of the State Department. We have a number of functions. One of them is to coordinate the identification, the prioritization, and the development to the enactment of policies, legislation, and regulations across the ministries, departments, and agencies. That is a huge responsibility. John, that's a function that lacked, that was not given priority or attention earlier in the previous administrations. Coordination, John, will help to ensure that there are no overlaps. There are no duplications in matters legislation. When there is no body to coordinate the legislative developments or policy development across ministries, departments, and agencies, you run a risk of overlap of legislation. You run a risk of duplication, and you run a risk of misusing the little resources that we have as a country. John, when we came on board, I'm still talking to that function of coordinating the identification and prioritization and development of government policies and legislation. When we came on board, we realized that since there was no coordination, we realized that there were a lot of overlaps along the development of legislative initiatives. You'd realize Ministry A working with the same, on the same legislative initiative that the other ministry is developing or working towards developing it. Remember, John, we have a very good constitution, Constitution 2010, that requires the executive, the parliament, all arms of government to ensure that there is public participation when you are developing legislation and even programs that you're doing. So here is a scenario where you have different agencies working on a legislation or a policy that is similar to the other one that is being worked on by another agency, And all of them requires resources to be allocated. It is obvious that resources will be, there will be no value for money there because you are working on the same thing differently. So this is a function that we've really implemented. We are really on it. And as we talk, there is a document that is called the Government Legislative Agenda document, which is actually, which was our flagship initiative as a State Department for Parliamentary Affairs. We call it a GLA. We've given it that acronym of GLA. Government Legislative Agenda is a document then that the State Department developed to ensure that the policies and legislative initiatives that the government is working on for the next 5 years is clear and they are prioritized so that we are sure on what we are developing, there are no overlaps, and we ensure that the resources are used prudently as we develop this government legislative agenda. Remember, these legislative agendas that we are developing, the policies, the legislative initiatives, the statutory instruments, which we call regulations, are meant to assist the government to deliver on national development agenda. In this case, we are talking about the bottom-up economic transformation agenda and the other international agendas that we are party to, like Agenda 2063, like the East Africa Vision 2050, like Sustainable Development Goals. That is one of the functions, John. The next function of the State Department... Let me ask you on
the functions that we are able to cover much ground.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the next, another function, I've said there are several.
Yeah.
Another function is to provide timely guidance and advice on measures that should be taken to address issues that are likely to impede the realization of a legislative initiative. We have a body within the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary that is that we are working together. That is the Steering Committee on Government Legislative Agenda. This is the body that unlocks the bottlenecks that are there. You see, sometimes you are developing a legislative initiative and you have several stakeholders to involve in the development of this legislation. There is what's called stakeholder engagement, where you involve these key people who are being affected by that legislative initiative that you are developing. So during that period, sometimes there comes stakeholders, lack of stakeholders consensus. Then we come on board, we sort out the issue, and then the legislative initiative will proceed to be developed. We'll follow the entire process. Another function, John, is to partner. We collaborate with Parliament to ensure that the executive held accountable on the policies that they are implementing and also on what they are doing. You remember in the year 2022, His Excellency the President asked Parliament to check a way in the legal framework on how executive or cabinet secretaries can be invited to Parliament so that they can speak to the policies that the executive is implementing and also respond to the issues that are affecting Mwananchi. So our work is coordinate that appearance in Parliament. And I'm sure you've seen that, and it has been working very well, because that's an opportunity for us as the executive to account what we are doing to the representative of the people who are members of Parliament, and also to people, because it's normally broadcasted. It's actually you who normally broadcast that. And that is something that used not to be there. Let me take you back, John. Earlier, before 2010 Constitution, we used to have a different system of government. That was parliamentary system of government. Now we are talking about presidential system of government, which we approved for ourselves through the 2010 Constitution. Parliamentary system of government, the former system of government, would allow a member of Parliament to be also a minister, and therefore information could flow like that. But in this presidential system, which we are in now, you cannot have a member of parliament being a member of executive at the same time. The law doesn't allow. So the State Department for Parliamentary Affairs comes in to be the bridge, to be the link between Parliament, the legislature, and the executive. So why? This will help us to ensure that there is a seamless engagement between the executive and Parliament. Having in mind that we are in these positions, John, to ensure that we give services to our people. It's about service delivery. When members of Parliament are elected, they are expected by the electorates to do the three functions that they are given. When the president is elected, he is expected by the electorates to deliver on the manifesto. So, that is executive, this is Parliament, you see? That means we have to work together. We have to, though there is separation of powers, then there has to be this synergy that we are talking about because we are serving the same man. There has to be a synergy. There has to be a collaboration between the two arms of government to ensure that we provide good governance, we provide the right services to the common man. So that is why we are there as a bridge between the executive and the legislature.
Let's talk about that bridge, PS, a bit, because by the time this idea of having ministers come to the plenary to respond to questions, there are those who argued it was an alien concept to the Constitution. But then again, through the amendment of standing orders, that was allowed. But how have you been able, in your coordination work, how have you been able to deal with concerns that the invites to Parliament sometimes have been overlapping? Today we had, for example, the Minister for Cooperatives, Wycliffe Oparanya, as well as the Prime Cabinet Secretary appear before the Senate. And you probably find tomorrow that the Minister for Cooperatives will probably be summoned by the National Assembly tomorrow, or the Prime CS again appearing in the National Assembly tomorrow. How are you dealing with that kind of too many summons that probably could distract these people from dispensing with their work in the executive branch?
That's a very good question, John. As a State Department, let me first of all let you know that for us to do that work of coordination, we started what's called Parliamentary Liaison Services. We created what's called Parliamentary Liaison Officers in every State Department. These officers are there to assist the State Department for Parliamentary Affairs in doing the coordination. They are there to assist the CS and the PS. Remember, PSs do also appear in parliamentary committees. Yes. It's only the CSs that are allowed to only appear in the plenary sessions. So these parliamentary liaison officers are there to assist the PSs and the CSs in preparation towards appearances, either in parliamentary committees or plenary sessions. What are we doing to avoid overlaps? When we started, I agree with you that there was those kind of overlaps. Because remember, Parliament is bicameral. There is National Assembly and there is Senate. And each house runs the activities separately. That is why when they amended the standing orders, they approved the appearances of cabinet secretaries in Senate to come in the morning, and then in National Assembly to come in the afternoon, so that we don't have that overlap. So you are invited at Senate, at the same time you are invited in the National Assembly. So first of all, that arrangement removes overlaps. Then number two, you need to have in mind that the two houses have their businesses running. And what we've done as a State Department is to organize with the clerks and of the two houses so that we have a threshold. There is a threshold. A CS cannot be invited today and tomorrow. It's not possible. It's normally Wednesday.
Hold that thought there.
Can you allow me to finish that?
No, let's pay some bills and then come back. I will remind you where you stopped.
Okay, thank you, John.
Let's take a breather. This conversation with the PS for Parliamentary Affairs, that is Aurelia Rono. And before we took the break, you were talking about what you're doing in terms of, the liaison between yourselves and Parliament to establish threshold. Pick it up from there.
Okay, thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
The appearances of cabinet secretaries in Parliament,
Mm-hmm.
I've said they appear on Wednesdays.
Mm.
That means you cannot be invited to appear in plenary on Tuesday or Thursday or Monday. It is Wednesday. Meaning, if you are invited this week Wednesday to respond to a question, then the next earliest time is next week Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
But I was telling you, Parliament normally puts together questions to some number then before inviting the CS, because they are also aware that the CS has so many other responsibilities. They have a bigger that mandate to ensure that the programs and the policies within his or her ministry are implemented the right way. So the question of overlap is really not there in parliamentary appearances. Parliament also allows us, executive, to reschedule, but there's a threshold for rescheduling. That if there is something that would not allow you to appear, it's not a do or die thing. You can write to Parliament, we coordinate with Parliament to reschedule that appearance to another time when the CS is available to appear. Remember, this is very, very important to us, John, because this is an opportunity for us as executive to speak to the representatives of the people about what we are doing as executive. So even if we are very busy as executive, we appreciate this opportunity to speak to the public, to speak to the people about the policies we are doing, and areas where they are not, the electorates are not clear, we have that opportunity to clarify at that point.
All right. Let's talk about the synergy, because the opposers of the idea when it was prompted by the president was that this risked making Parliament an appendage of the executive. We're talking about synergy today. And the arrangement that you have, is it synergy or parliamentary capture?
John, it cannot be that way.
Okay.
As I explained earlier, that we are here as the three arms of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, to serve the same man, to serve the same Wanjiku. And therefore, even if there is separation of powers, there is clear separation of powers, right? But we need to know that we are there to serve the common man. And therefore, we need to work together. We need to collaborate together to deliver to this common man, to ensure that we have good governance, to ensure that the service delivery is efficient. So Parliament will do their work, the legislative work, the representation work, and the oversight work. Executive, we do the implementation work. But remember, we also have that right to propose a legislative proposal that is going to support the programs that you're doing. Take, for example, the social health, the SHA, the Social Health Authority, the universal health coverage. Let me bring it from there. You see, we had to come up with laws. We had to propose laws to Parliament to enable us come up with the digital health, come up with the social health insurance fund, come up with those programs that we had promised in the manifesto. So we propose the legislation. And look, we cannot just send the legislation to Parliament. The synergy part comes in there now. We have committee sittings with them to explain the reason behind what we are bringing. What is the policy behind this legislative proposal that you are bringing? And what is it going to help? That is the synergy we are talking about. Otherwise, Parliament is doing their work. They are doing the oversight work. Executive, we are doing the implementation work. But we need to collaborate together so that we deliver the greater good to the people of Kenya.
Let's talk about communication, PS, and how, the modes of communication between yourselves, for example, as executive and the legislature, and from your State Department, because I'm sure not once have you seen a lot of anger, for example, in the plenary, because the CS has, for example, indicated because of this and this, I'm not able to make it to the chamber to answer your questions. And sometimes you've seen members of parliament or even senators propose sanctions against the minister for not showing up. I want to understand what level of communication goes towards communicating these decisions, and for this both houses of parliament to understand that the minister was committed elsewhere.
As we speak, John, I think that problem has reduced a bit. It's not like when we started. When you are starting something, it will take some time to get to the level that you wanted. Earlier, when we started, you'd have a cabinet secretary writing to Parliament on probably that same day or just a day before the appearance. And remember, the House Business Committee are aware, they approve that so-and-so is appearing, and then the letter reaches Parliament that morning. Of course, even if it's you, you'll feel so bad because you'd have used that opportunity to allocate other businesses there. But as we talk now, I told you there's a threshold that has been set. If you must reschedule because of unavoidable circumstance, then you have to do it within a given period of time, and there has to be reasonable reasons why you should reschedule that appearance. So the threshold is very clear.
Okay.
And where we are now, I think that problem is, we've sorted it out.
I'm sure since this became a reality, you've been able to audit the entire process of, summoning cabinet secretaries or cabinet secretaries appearing, or yourselves as principal secretaries appearing before standing committees of the National Assembly or the Senate. What do you think have been the challenges when you audit the process? What do you think have been the challenges so far?
With appearances to the departmental committees, the challenge that is still there is that overlap, especially now with the committees in Senate and the committees in the National Assembly. But we are working together with the two houses to try and see the best way we can sort out that, because you see, committees can invite at any time because they run so many things. There are petitions here, there are bills here, there are policies here, and I've told you each house works on their own businesses. So for committees, we are still working. That is still the challenge that is there, though we are working out together with Parliament to see how best that can be addressed. But for parliamentary plenary sessions, I think that one we've dealt with.
Have you been able to iron out, for example, because one of the functions you're saying is to look at the possibility of overlapping laws that go to Parliament emanating from different departments within government? Have you been able to iron out that so much so that you don't have overlaps now being experienced in terms of proposed legislation before the National Assembly or Senate?
Yes, John, that one we've dealt we've dealt with that very well. By coming up with government legislative agenda schedule, it's like a Bible. It's like a strategic plan for the legislative initiatives. By the time we arrived at that, we had ironed out all those other overlaps that were there. As at now, you can tell which in these legislative initiatives, where each of them is domiciled, so that we don't have Ministry A having the same legislation that the other ministry is having. So we ironed out that, and the government legislative agenda schedule has all those policies and all those regulations and all those legislative initiatives that each ministry is working on. So there is no overlap there. Okay. Where we are working out with MDAs now is when there is a private member's bill. Remember, Parliament has that mandate of doing legislation. So
Yes.
they have that right to do it. And sometimes they can come up with a bill that executive is already working on it. Remember, across the executive, we have several stages of developing a bill or a policy. And that's what we are coordinating. If you want to develop a policy, for example, like Ministry of, Ministry of Culture, for example, if there is a bill that needs to be, an act that needs to be amended, or a legislative initiative that needs to be developed, you don't just do it like that in a day and it's done. It's a real process. That's why we developed what's called we developed together with the Office of the Attorney General what's called the guidelines on the development of national policies and legislation that gives, that unbundles every step that a legislative initiative needs to follow or a policy needs to follow. From working on the concept notes, this is what we want to do, then being approved by the PAs, approved by the CAs, then a committee is set now to work on that legislative initiative. The committee will sit, work on the legislative initiative, and then invite the different stakeholders that are supposed to participate or that are being affected by that proposal.
All right.
The stakeholders will sit, and then we go to public participation, then it proceeds to the Attorney General for formal drafting now. Before it is drafted by the Attorney General, it's normally called the layman's bill. So once the AG drafts the bill, then it's taken to Cabinet for approval. If the Cabinet agrees with it and it's approved, it is then transitioned to Parliament.
Either of the houses.
Yeah.
Let's talk about...
So I was saying, where you could see areas of like overlap is when there is a private member's bill and there is a bill that is being worked by the ministry. But we cannot call that overlap because the member of Parliament has that right to do that law, that bill. What we do as executive is to engage, to participate during pre-publication scrutiny as executive, and then we will give our side of the story. What is the policy that we have towards this legislative initiative that you've developed? Right. If it is not supporting the government policy, then we discuss with the member to allow us what we are developing, or we amend together. It is about discussion, consultation, you see? Right.
Yeah. It's good you mentioned about the private members bill in less than 1.5 minutes, because I need to put a close to this one. President William Ruto's administration rides on the pillars of the bottom-up economic agenda. And Parliament has its own calendar and the priorities they have therein in terms of legislation. How did you work with Parliament so that even as it dispenses with its duties, prioritizes the policies that fit into the bottom-up economic transformation agenda?
What is there, John? One is to inform you of what the standing order says. Actually, Parliament normally prioritize the government bills. And that's why you would see them being discussed on Tuesdays, Wednesdays in the afternoon, and Thursdays. Private members' bills normally appears on Wednesdays morning. So Parliament normally prioritize government bills. What is there is for us in the executive to speed up the development of this legislative initiative so that they progress so fast. Because these stages that I've told you, there are about 6-7 stages that it takes. So if there is no coordination, a bill, a legislative proposal can even take 2 years or 3 years. Yeah. So what is there is for us as the executive to fast track the development of them, because once they are in Parliament, Parliament normally give priority to government bills. Yeah.
Largely, the ball is always on your court.
But we are doing well with the coordination.
Okay.
As we speak, John, the GLA schedule that I've told you have seen about 43 legislative initiatives that have been passed and assented to by the President by the end of last year, 2024. And we've had others this year, about 6-7 of them that have been passed. So the coordination is working. Yes.
All right. I want you to use 30 seconds of our camera to your last word really for tonight, because we'll continue having you again on set to discuss the progress of the coordination between the executive and the legislature. But your last word in 30 seconds in that camera. There.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, first of all. Thank you for the opportunity that you've given us. And I would wish next time we get more time to speak to this, because it's a lot that we do in the State Department for Parliamentary Affairs. I would invite all of us to go to our website for the State Department for Parliamentary Affairs. There's a lot there that is going to help all of us, even all of us, to understand the policy development, the legislative developments in Kenya, and the regulatory developments. We also have a document that is called the Public Policy Handbook. That is a document that is to ensure standardization of policies, that we have high quality and standardized policies in our government that are there to support the delivery of national development agenda. So thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to coming here again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Aurelia Rono, the Principal Secretary, State Department for Parliamentary Affairs, is domiciled under the Office of a Prime Cabinet Secretary. And of course, you can visit those websites, as mentioned, to familiarize yourself with the kind of work that is being done. And we thank you again for your time and coming tonight. This is where we put a cap on the interview, but of course, this conversation continues online and offline. But I want to take you back to studio after this short break for the continuation of the broadcast.